Hello and welcome to another episode of this amazing Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you by OneLearn. In the previous video, we talked about customizing our workspace on the Adobe application. Now, in this video, we're going to be focusing on the layers panel in our workspace. We're going to talk about the interface of the layers panel and basically how the layers work and how you can use them in your project. Layers are like the building blocks of any Photoshop project, any graphics project for that matter, because anything you design is basically made up of layers. Whether it's your image layer, your text layer, your shape layer, or your part layer, it is all a layer. They are all put together to create what we call good graphics. Now let's talk a little bit about our layers panel in our Photoshop application. This right here, where you see the layers, is our layers tab, and it contains every option that we need to use when working with our layers. Layers, like I said, are the building blocks of a Photoshop project, which means they are actually very important because you cannot arrange your document or your project files without your layers. Now let me give you a brief understanding of how layers work, and to do that we're going to start up a new project. So I'll go down to File, New. I'll pick a random width and height. I'll just make it 7 by 7, just the way it is right now. Change the name to text project, of course. Okay, here we go. We have a new project. If you look onto our layers tab, you already see what we call a background tab, a background layer. This is the first layer you see when working with any project. There is always a background layer, and the background layer cannot be deleted. One thing you also notice is that it is locked. There's a locked icon down there, which means that the layer cannot be moved. If you try to move it, it will say you could not use the move tool because the layer is locked. Now, the background layer is usually the best left locked, because if there's no background layer, all you will see is, I want to give you an idea of what you will see without the background layer. This is me unlocking. I just unlocked the background layer, which means I can now edit my black background layer, and you can see that the lock button is there. Now I did that by double clicking on this, and then I can change the name of my background layer to whatever I want. Maybe for example background. If I want, I can change the color to whatever I want, which means that I can change the color of the background to whatever I want. Let me say for example blue. Now we don't need a mode, we'll talk about that later, and I'll put a click on OK. Now what it has done right now is that it created a new layer called background layer, which is in locked, and then you can see that this icon right here with the eye is now blue because we selected the blue color back then. So this eye right now just it indicates layer visibility. Like you see, if I click on it, the layer goes up. Now when you see checkers boxes like this, it means that you're now seeing the transparent background, which means that there is no background at that point. If I put this, it means that there's a layer on top of my transparency. What I'm trying to tell you is that right now there's nothing on my project as you've seen, because I have actually removed the visibility of this background layer, which means right now all we are seeing is an empty project. If we save this and we open it up with a photo app, photo preview application, all we'll see is emptiness. Let's go back to layers. I'm going to put this back. This is my background layer, obviously, so it is white. Okay, as you can see, it is a white color background layer. I can move it however I want because I'm selected on the layer, so I can move it however I want. Okay, so let's do something like adding new layers. First things first, I'm going to draw a square with my shape tool, of course. Okay, now this is my first layer, or slightly my second layer is a rectangle, and now you can see rectangle 1 because I drew a shape rectangle and it created a new layer. So we have a layer on top of the background layer, which is rectangle 1. Now we're going to add another layer. We're going to add another shape. I'm going to change the color this time. This time I'm going to add a circle. You know what? Sorry, I want to add a text too. Just adding text too. Okay. So one thing I need to tell you is, in order to add a text to a shape, you can see right now that my shape 2 is looking like you've seen the icon. The icon is basically different from what we usually do whenever we're entering, typing out a text, and that's because we are currently typing on a shape. Okay, let me give you an example. I'm going to move the shape to the side a little bit. Click on my text tool again. You can see the icon of my text tool on my mouse cursor. You can see it while it's on the shape cursor. You can see there's a very huge difference. What this means is that if my icon here, which is it's on the background layer, it means I can type anywhere. But if I put the mouse cursor on my shape layer, it means that I'm going to start typing from the edge of my shape. That's just basically how it works. So if I click on this right now, I will start typing from, let me just increase the character, A, B, C. Now you can see that I am typing off the edge of my shape. So my text will take the shape of my rectangular shape. But if you don't want it to be that way, I'm going to cancel this. Hold down your shift, click on your mouse, and you can start typing from anywhere on your shape. A, B, C. Okay, now that's not what we're going to focus on right now. What I just want to do is create a text layer on top of this rectangular shape. I'm going to do this. Rectangle 1 as my text. I'm going to move it to the middle here. Okay. Now we're going to add another shape, which of course is another layer. I'll pick a different color this time, a purple color. I'll draw a shape, rectangular shape, of course. Sorry, a circular shape. Now we have a shape. I will call this my circle 1. Of course. Circle 1. I would once again move it to the middle. Click and drag. Alright, I'm going to add another shape. This time I'm going to add a triangle, 3 sides, of course. Not too big. Okay, I'm going to change the color. Sorry. In another way you can actually change the color of your shape. We've already talked about that in one of our previous videos. I'm going to turn this around just so. Here we go. And I will write on this, of course, apply triangle 1. I'm going to move it to the middle. There we go. Now we have 3 different shapes. I'm going to add one last shape and then I can explain. I'm adding a square on top of my rectangle. Okay, I will change the color of the square to yellow and then add a text and name it rectangle 2. Now it's not exactly visible. My text isn't exactly visible because of the color. So I'm going to change the color of my text by coming down to this place here. What I did, I just selected my entire text. Now I'm going to pick a color that works. Okay, the green color works. And okay. And there we go. Now I have created graphics. Of course, I created graphics, and each of these graphics is actually made up of layers. Now you can come down here. I'm going to move my layers tab to the top a little bit so you can see more. I'm going to scroll down. You can see the layers that I just created. Now if I'm on my move tool and I click show transforms controls, what that means is anytime I click on any layer, you'll be able to see the transform controls around that layer. So I click on rectangle. You can see my transform controls on the rectangle shape, which means that this rectangle shape here is being controlled by this layer down here, the rectangle layer. Okay, so here we go. This is the rectangle shape. Now I'm going to move on to the next one, which is rectangle 1. Of course, the text. Now this is the text. It controls the layer from this direction, controls the text in my workspace. The next one, ellipse 1, of course, is the circle. And then we have the text, circle 1, as you can see. And then we have the polygon. And then we got, sorry, the polygon, of course, is the triangle. Polygon with 3 sides is a triangle. So we have our triangle text, and then we have rectangle, which is of course is the last square we created, and we have a rectangle to text right above it. So what this means is that we have our rectangular shape at the background, at the back, simply because it's at the bottom of our layer. We have background, of course, which is the last, and then after it we have the rectangle. So which means that the rectangle layer is on top of the background layer. That's why you can see that the rectangle is on top of the white background layer. And then we have our text layer, which is on top of our rectangle layer. And then we have our ellipse, which is on top of our rectangle, this rectangular layer over here. The ellipse is on top of the rectangle layer, and that's basically how they all work. Now if I want to move this triangle here to be on top of both my square shape, the rectangle 2 text and the triangle 1 text, all I have to do is click on my polygon 1 and drag to the top. And once it's on the top, it's going to hide everything that is underneath it, which means that it is on top of everything that's underneath it. All right, I'm going to take that back. Let me use another example. Let me use this rectangle, of course, the blue rectangle. The blue rectangle is a huge shape, so if I put it on top, it will cover everything else because it will be on top of everything else, and that's what we're going to do. Remember that we did not delete the other layers. What this means is that the rectangular layer is just on top of every other layer. So that's basically how layers work. It's very, very useful when you want to arrange your work. Okay, now let's move on to next thing. Let's explain what you can do in layers with the layers panel interface. First things first, you can see the search button. It's a search button. What this means is it depends on how you want to see your layers. So this helps you filter that by name, by effect, by mode, by attribute, or color. You can choose to filter by specific color, which means that you only get to see specific colors. That's specific colors on this side. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the colors. It's just like branding your layers. Now, for example, remember we choose blue for this. I can come over here, choose a different color, orange. You can see I'm basically branding my colors. So if I put 2 yellow together, what color is this? Orange, of course. Orange, yeah. And I come here and I click on color, which is my filter. I'll use a filter color, and I click orange. I will only get to see the orange layers because it's been filtered. Okay, so I only get to see the orange layers. So you can turn off and turn on your filter from here if you want to. Okay, you can choose by kind, you can choose by name, you can choose to search for the name, you can choose to use the effect. So it will bring out every layer that has the effect. You can choose the mode, you can choose attribute, and you can choose kind. So when you say kind, you can see you can choose an image kind. That's if your layer is in an image format. You can choose an adjustment layer, so it's to filter out to bring out only adjustment layers. You can choose text. You can see I can see my text. You can choose paths to show you your paths. Sorry, for shapes, this is for shapes. You can see shapes only. Then this last one is for smart objects. If you have any smart objects on your layer, it will make them visible. If you go over to name, of course you search for the name. If you put a rectangle, it will bring out every layer with the name that I just typed in. Now we can move on to effect. We don't currently have any layer with an effect, but we'll talk about that later. So that's this layer here is just to filter in your layers. If you want to display only a certain number of layers, maybe you have a lot of layers here and you want to filter them out, this is what you're going to use. The next one is the opacity. The opacity is used for making your layer transparent. Let's say, for example, I want to make this yellow a little bit transparent. I'll come over here, reduce the opacity of that shape, and you can see it's becoming less and less visible, which means you can see through it. So that's how opacity works. It's basically the same thing with the fill, of course. It makes it transparent to a certain extent. So you can basically use the opacity and fill for the same thing if you ask me. And then the next is the mode. If you want to blend your layer with other layers on your project, you can come over here and pick a certain fill. This is a dissolve fill. Some of them will not really show you any effects, others will. This is darken, multiply, color bond, linear bond, lighting. So you can see that each of these modes have different effects. So if you know what effect you want to use, you can just come over here and pick an effect, and then that particular layer will have an effect on the layers which it is on top of on your layer panel. Okay, so we're going to go back to normal. Next thing is to lock. If you want to lock your layer, you can come over here. Let's say you don't want to be able to move your layer. If you click on this lock position, you will not be able. Right now I'm selected on my rectangular layer, which is my shape, but I cannot move it because the layer is locked. Also, I can choose another layer. Let's say, for example, my background layer. My background layer is a pixel layer, so you cannot do when we talk about locking. If you want to lock the transparency, so you will be able to use the transparency or thereabouts. If you lock this, you cannot you cannot exactly affect the transparency of this layer. That's if you leave it locked. If you pick this two here, you lock the image pixels, which means that no matter what happens, you cannot paint on that layer, you cannot erase from that layer, you cannot use your tools generally on that layer because it is locked. You can also use the general lock, which is stop you from generally editing this layer at the end of the day. So it's locked, you can't do anything to it. You can only just move it on your layers panel, but you cannot use any of your tools on it. Okay, now let's move on. If you want to delete a layer, it's actually very easy to delete a layer. All you have to do is click on the layer you want to delete. Come down here to the delete button and click on the delete button. It will ask you, do you want to delete the layer? You click on yes, and the layer is gone. You can notice that we deleted the text rectangle 2. I'm going to bring back that with Control Z. With Control Z, you can see it's back. Okay, that's how you delete a layer. You can delete any layer simply by clicking on the layer you want to delete. You come down here and click on your delete layer, and the layer is gone. Now the next thing we're going to do is to add a new empty layer. If you want to do anything like maybe paint, for example, if you want to paint and you don't want to paint on your pixels, you don't want to paint on your shapes, you don't want to paint on your text too, you want to paint on a new layer, you click where you want the layer to appear. Wherever you click, the layer that you want to insert will appear on top of whatever layer you're selecting right now. For example, I'm selecting this polygon 1 layer, which is a triangle. If you click on new layer, the new layer I added will be on top of the polygon layer, which means whatever I'm doing will be on top of that polygon layer. So I want to paint, for example, I want to paint on this new layer. Okay, so you can see that whatever I'm painting is on top of the polygon layer, which is triangle layer, but it is underneath the text 2, triangle 1, the shape 2, the yellow shape 2, and the rectangle 2, text 2. Now this layer I just inserted, of course I can move it however I want. It's a paint layer because I painted on it, so I can move it however I want because I've selected on it, and use the move tool to move the layer from one direction to another. Now that's how you use that particular tool. I'm going to delete the layer, of course. Now if you want to arrange your layers using folders, let's say you're creating a very bulky graphic design project and you have a lot of layers and you want to arrange them into layers, you use a folder. I'm going to click on this. It creates a new folder and it's called group 1. I'm going to name it text group. Text group. Now in this text group, I am going to put in, if you want to select multiple layers, you can click on the first one, hold down your control and select, click on the other layers that you want to select. I'm currently selecting on my text too. Now in order to move them to this folder, I will click on the tools I've selected, drag them on top of the new folder I just created. And there we go. I can close the folder by clicking on this, and every single text tool I have is inside that new folder, which is called a group. So I just grouped the text tools. I can do whatever I want to do to them using this folder. If, for example, I want to add an adjustment layer, I can add it directly to every single one of these text tools. Once they're in the folder, I can make them visible. I can make them invisible because they're all in one folder. So whatever effect I add to this folder, it affects every single one of these layers that are actually in that folder itself. So I'm going to put every shape I have into a folder. Sorry, just created another one. I will call it shapes. To rename a folder, all you have to do is right click on that folder, look for the to rename a folder. All you have to do is double click on that folder. You can actually rename any layer that way. Just go to where the name is, double click, and you can rename it however you want. So I'm going to select the layers I want to put in my next folder, click drag, and there we go. You can see we have our folders. We have the text folder, we have the shape folder. Now I have text tools in here, sorry, my text in here, and my shapes in here. And any effects I add to these two folders will be represented. Sorry, would affect any layer that's inside this specific folder. The next video will talk about adding effects or marks into our layers. In this video, we started on our introduction into the layers panel in our Adobe Photoshop application. We talked about how layers can actually be used for arrangements of our layers in our project file. Now, in the next video, we're going to continue from there. We're going to talk about using effect on our layers. We're going to talk about using the masking tool, and then, of course, introduction into our adjustment layers.